you're scrolling on LinkedIn, did you ever catch yourself stalking that coworker who got into the elitist MBA program or on Forbes 30 under 30 and have stacked promotions year after year? I know you do. And if you're wondering, how did they get so lucky? You're in the right place. Hello. Welcome to Coffee with Minnie. This is the second episode of the Get Lucky career series, where I talk about tips and tricks of how you accelerate your careers in your 20s and 30s as an operator. And yes, we're doing it a little differently today. We're in the woods, but I thought this might be a good time to have a chat, heart to heart, and give you some really interesting tips when you're enjoying the summer wherever you are. There's nobody there. And there's the dog. And if you're new to this channel, my name is Minnie, your favorite Gemini from New York, and I have built a multinational career across Hong Kong, Singapore, and now working as a chief of staff in New York City after getting my MBA from MIT Sloan. And today's episode is about the second piece of advice that I would like to share as this Get Lucky series. That is, get closer to money. And no, I am not talking about getting the biggest, the fattest paycheck ever, but I'm talking about how getting close to the revenue and how money is made in any company is going to be an accelerator to your career as an operator. Naval Ravikant famously said, learn to build, learn to sell, and if you can do both, you're unstoppable. This really boils down to what businesses are about, which is, if you think about it, you want to make profit, and that requires you to have revenue and take out your cost. And if there's no revenue, there's no profit and there's no business. So this is why I'm spending this episode talking to you about why I think a career that is close to the revenue is going to help you get ahead. Also, the couple of career paths that I think are a great starting point if you're considering it. Let's get into it. So here are 4 reasons why I think a revenue adjacent career is going to give you unfair advantages in your career as an operator. First one, you actually learn how businesses work. If you are building a career in the private sector, working in a business, if you think about it, the idea is simple. You want to understand how companies and businesses make money. It is simply that because now there are so many multinational companies that are multi-billion dollars and have hundreds and thousands of employees working for this gigantic machine, you have a lot of new roles and job titles that simply did not exist even a decade ago. And a lot of these job titles started sounding fancier and fancier. And a lot of us who started in that world seem to have forgotten what the core is about working in a corporate. And truly, if you think about the job of a CEO, a chief executive officer, and really the biggest target that you ever have in that job is to make money for the company. And obviously, depending on the size of the company and your industry, the role expands and the way you would go about achieving all these metrics and KPIs is a little bit different. But at the end of the day, it's kind of a sales job, as well as your board members and all the other stakeholders in the industry, where if you're a public company, you're constantly selling the story, selling the company, selling your success to investors. Or if you're in a smaller company and you're private, you're actually in the deal room making deals and negotiating with your clients to sign a contract. So the earlier and faster you understand how a business makes money, the quicker you're going to climb that corporate ladder. I know, not the most exciting thing in the world these days, but it really helps you fast track your career in a corporation, no matter what function you end up taking and doing. So as you start your career as an operator, you got to understand, what is the product that I am currently covering? Who are the clients? How are we pricing the product? How are clients paying for the product? And how much revenue are we making every year, every quarter, every month? And if you're in a larger company, how much does my business contribute to the wider company's revenue pool? Number 2, your KPI and performance metrics in a revenue adjacent role tend to be a lot simpler and more straightforward. This might not be everyone's cup of tea, but you truly eliminate all the possibilities of arguing with your manager about whether you did well or not this year. The numbers speak for themselves. If you close a contract that is worth $5 million, it's not even about pleasing other stakeholders or helping others understand how well you are doing. A lot of it is also for yourself. By having a clear metric and goal, you can actually know pretty well whether you're progressing in your role or not, and whether you're really good at this job or not. And that is one reason why I actually was very, very grateful that I pretty much started my career all in client-facing roles and eventually moved into enterprise sales. And in a couple years I was in that role, I was able to build a team and manage a $10 million small business unit in a hyper-growth market in a very exciting sector, at least at the time. So the reward is very, very straightforward. And number 3, you might be thinking about it already, but the financial upside is also very lucrative. Many revenue adjacent roles are commission or bonus driven, which means that if you achieve or exceed your target, your financial reward just increases accordingly. And depending on the role and the company and the industry, your base salary actually might not be terrible. So depending on your tenure and years of experience, you might have both enough stability, but also a high enough ceiling where you could truly see your hard work being translated into financial reward. And again, going back to the CEO example, for a lot of public companies, that is actually how CEOs' packages are structured. Their financial reward is completely tied to the company's performance. And number 4, you actually get to build the relationships that actually matter. And this one took me many years to realize and actually understand. A lot of times when we're talking about people getting real lucky and how can people change their career path 3 times in 2 years and making major pivots in even the early stages of their careers, it's all about who you know and what relationships you have. Being in revenue adjacent roles, you're training your own muscles to be very, very articulate when it comes to business impact, the future of the company, the strategy of the business. And when you're in front of external partners, clients, talking about products and the company's vision and pricing strategy and just the overall outlook of your company, you're also training that muscle to become a real business leader and business executive. And a lot of times, depending on the type of revenue adjacent role you're in, you get to meet extremely senior executives from other companies, from your clients, from your partners, from your vendors even. And that in your early career is extremely valuable. You learn about how to be in those rooms, how to have executive presence, and how to build relationships even at such a junior level. And you might think that's all luck, but a lot of times those opportunities have a higher likelihood of showing up in your career path when you make the right decision and when you make smart choices that put you on that path. So now let's talk about the couple of career paths and job opportunities that I think are great starters if you are looking for a revenue adjacent role that's really going to help you get lucky and accelerate your career. Number 1, B2B or enterprise sales. For the longest time, a lot of people have the incredibly wrong perception of sales. And when people hear sales, a lot of times people associate the job with the career path with B2C sales, which is the sales associate that you see in your retail store in Sephora for your $100 face cream that you use. And no offense to all the sales associates in retail, but in this episode specifically, we are talking about B2B sales. You're not selling to individual consumers, but selling to businesses. And just to give you some context, some multi-billion-dollar businesses these days actually spend anywhere between $9,000 to $14,000 on software and services per employee, running 275 SaaS or software or services apps on average. For example, recently the Veterans Affairs signed a $1.6 billion contract with Salesforce for their AI agent services. And who do you think went on to close those deals? There are a sales team within Salesforce who are going out there negotiating those contracts and closing those deals. $1.6 billion. For this career path, the average pay in the US for an account executive in those B2B sales roles is around $200,000 for total take-home pay. However, if you're a top performing account executive with massive bonuses, your total take-home pay can be as much as $500,000. And a very underrated perk that people don't talk enough about is that by being in B2B sales, or especially relationship-driven or strategic sales, you probably get to travel a lot and wine and dine your clients, staying in nice hotels, having cool cultural experiences, and so on, all on company dimes. And the core skills of this job really need to focus on figuring out the buying process and the right stakeholder. You gotta have great relationship building and storytelling skills, but also you gotta be able to articulate the value you can add with your product because you're essentially making a pitch to the CEO of your client company. And number 2, of course, you gotta be a world-class negotiator. You gotta be able to sit in a room, be able to understand the underlying motivation, read the room, read below the surfaces, industry and product knowledge. You gotta know your product, you gotta be knowledgeable and resourceful and helpful. And finally, creativity. In B2B sales, there are just a bazillion problems that you cannot foresee or picture ahead of time. So the very, very important skill to have, you gotta be able to think out of the box, try to solve the problem that anybody throws at you internally and externally. Finally, breaking in, there is actually no barriers to entry and probably the easiest path into a revenue adjacent or revenue specific role. However, just be prepared that the first couple of months and years might be tough as you take on the most rejections you have ever taken on your whole life and having really tough travel schedules to have face time with clients. Second one is product managers or go-to-market roles that have revenue targets. This is probably a little bit more specific to tech. In tech, there is this very defined career path as product managers who are essentially owning the entire origination, launch, and development of a specific product. That could be as user-facing as the thumbs up button on Facebook, as we all like to talk about it in a product world, or specifically the review feature on your Google map that you open to find a restaurant or whatever shops that you're looking at. But it could also be something as obscure as building specific tooling and software for internal users only. And actually right now, 92% of product leaders these days say that they actually have a revenue outcome or revenue metric tied to their performance. When it comes to compensation for product managers, a mid-level product manager in tech, this range is going to be huge, but the base salary could range from $150,000 to $250,000 ballpark. But when you add bonuses, equities for big tech or large tech companies who are public, the total take-home package could easily be $300,000 plus dollars. So it is extremely lucrative, great money, great corporate benefits, and the role that will continually to be challenging and exciting in its own way. Skills for product managers. And if you're interested to know more about the role, I've actually been a product manager intern during my MBA times. You can check out my previous video on my day in life. But I do think quantitative reasoning, prioritization, and under pressure, as well as flexible and effective communication are probably the top 3 skills that I think are critical to a good product manager. And breaking in, because it's such a lucrative path, at least in the past, it is much more difficult to break in versus B2B sales or technical sales. It has essentially a technical barrier where you do need to understand the software development or tech products fundamentals. There are really 2 ways. And one is if you're earlier in your career, you can always pursue what they call an APM role, Associate Product Manager programs. And alternatively, you can also pursue an MBA. A lot of tech companies like Amazon do like to hire MBA graduates into those roles in the company. Business development and deal structuring teams. This is a role that I think is a bit less talked about and is a bit more industry specific. And you can think of it as the most quantitative role in a revenue adjacent career path. It's the team that usually builds financial models and analyze deal economics to make sure that the proposal that the sales team put in front of a client provides some sort of financial upside for the company. And this role and this path is most commonly seen in content acquisition, advertising, healthcare, utility and energy, as well as real estate. And business development managers typically earn on an average $130,000 to $150,000 in base salary, but the top performers, again, can have a take-home salary of more than $260,000. And what's really interesting about this role is that even though it's called business development and seems very revenue adjacent or revenue focused, it could also be a great starting point or a pivot point into a more financy role, such as corporate development, corporate strategy, and M&A. And these are the teams within a company that goes out to decide whether we buy a different company or do we merge with another company, and looking at really the underlying financial performances of your own company or other companies. And the skills for this role, I think quantitative reasoning for sure, financial modeling, being extremely analytical. But I do think storytelling is actually one that people don't talk enough about. You should be able to translate your results and insights into something that clients and your business partners can understand and digest. And in terms of breaking in, this is probably the path that draws in the most former investment bankers, consultants, and people who have very quantitative background and experiences. But I don't think that's a given, and depending on the role and the company you're in, that it could still be a path. And then finally, number 4, join a startup and do whatever. This is not to say what you do and what your job title is does not matter in a startup, but because of the nature of the company size, you typically would probably do a bit more than your job description outlines in a startup. Depending on the size of your startup, you could be much closer to the CEO, to the revenue, and to the core development of your first product, much closer than in a big company. And one piece of advice that I have gotten from my real Silicon Valley friends is that the Series B to Series D companies may be a sweet spot if you still want some sort of structure where a product is defined, you have clients, you have some sort of roadmap and model that works for the product, and you can just focus on helping to build out the product or build out the client base and understanding how the company makes money. So that is all for today. We've covered the second topic of this series, which is get closer to the revenue and where the money comes from, which will give you significant unfair advantages in your operator career. Let me know what you think and hope you're enjoying the beautiful summer or winter, I guess, weather, wherever you are. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.